A very good morning to all who are joining us in this live webinar today. This is Sally Chiu from Temasek Polytechnic, bringing you the 8th in the series of live webinars. This live webinars is brought to you jointly by the Singapore Training and Development Association, better known as STADA here in Singapore, and the Center for TransCultural Studies at Temasek Polytechnic. We certainly hope that through such live webinars, connecting practitioners, learners, and leaders would be one of STADA's bid to contribute to building learning communities as part of our vision to embrace people and to extend boundaries. And our theme for today's live webinar is Reinventing Training and Embracing Social HR. And for this morning, we have a treat for you. We have two very distinguished and engaging presenters for our live webinar. Our very first speaker is Dr. Roy Pollock. Dr. Roy, it's nighttime for him, but he's still very well alert and waiting for the session to proceed. It will be, I've seen his notes, both a provocative and a very practical session where he will take us through the 6D approach, asking more about it later, to rethink training design to create high-impact training that can be used in learning organizations all around the globe. And of course, he will generously share with you some tools, some examples that you can adopt. Our second speaker, Dr. Anna Tavis, has traveled a long way. She's actually on the faculty of New York University. We're going to tell you more about her in a moment, but she's going to challenge us how we can be change agents to prepare organizations for the new, what she calls the bossless organizations, with a new model called social HR, which combines social media technology with the core function of HR. How she's going to do that, I'm going to leave it to her to tell us more about it. And now, Roy, in the interest of time, over to you. All set, go.
Great, thank you very much. So in the short time that I have available, what I'd like to talk about is reinventing training. And in particular, I'd like to answer three questions. Do we really even need training anymore? Dr. Tavis is going to talk about the fantastic media that are now available, the social networking, the opportunity to interact in ways we've never been able to before. And so the question becomes, do we actually need training? If so, if we decide that we do need training, does it really need to be reinvented? What's wrong with training today? And finally, if it needs to be reinvented, in what way do we need to reinvent it? Well, we certainly need to keep learning. This is from Arie de Geys. He was the strategic planner for Royal Dutch Shell. And he said that the ability to learn faster than your competitors may be the only sustainable competitive advantage. That the old sources of competitive advantage, economies of scale, financial capital, technology, know-how, are all becoming shorter and shorter lived. They can all be readily duplicated. And that the only way to stay ahead, the only way to stay competitive in today's world is to continue to learn, and indeed to learn faster than your competitors if you want to stay competitive. But do we need training? Because after all, everything is on the internet. You can look it all up. Do we really actually need training? You've also all heard about 70-20-10, that it's been estimated that roughly 70% of learning takes place on the job, 20% through coaching, mentoring, interaction with others, and about 10% through formal training. Well, if that's true, then is it really necessary that we have training? Well, I think it is, and for these reasons. Uniformity. The problem with apprenticeship is it's only as good as the mentor. The reason that medical schools and that went away from the old apprenticeship model in the early 1900s was that it was so uneven. It depended so greatly on who your mentor was. Secondly, quality, because after all, while there's a lot of information on the internet, There's certainly also a lot of misinformation. So one of the goals of a corporate training department is to be sure that people get the right information and they're trained in the way that our company wants to perform. Compliance. We need to, if in many cases we're in regulated industries, or for reasons of safety, or if we're dealing with potentially dangerous chemicals or procedures, then we need to make sure everyone has the required skills and knowledge. And while it would be nice to leave everything up to individual initiative, for certain kinds of things, particularly if there's significant risk to either the company or to the individual, then we need to make sure that everyone gets the required skills and knowledge. And of course, skills, some of what we need people to do, whether that's particular ways of serving customers, whether that's technical skills, or whether that's managerial skills, you really can't get skills from a book. At some point you have to practice the skills, and you need a coach there beside you to help you master the skills. And then finally, I think one of the functions of a corporate training department is to remove blinders. People often don't know what they don't know. For example, leaders are often quite surprised by their 360 feedback. Their perception of their leadership skills is often quite different than the perception of others. So those are some reasons that I think training will need to continue to exist. It will evolve. We will take advantage of technology, but I think that we're going to need to have structured learning into the future as part of our organizations. And Dr. Tavis, you're free to disagree if when it's your turn. The question then is, does training need to be reinvented? Now let me ask you this question. The executive board in the United States did a study, and they asked business managers this question. They said, if learning and development were completely eliminated today, would employee performance decline, stay the same, or actually improve? Okay, so that was the question. If L&D were completely eliminated today, would employee performance decline, stay the same, or improve? Would you all write down, you could put it in chat if you wanted, but take a guess. What percent of business managers said that eliminating L&D would make no difference? In other words, if L&D were eliminated, they said employee performance would stay the same or actually improve. Okay, take a minute. What percent do you think said that? Well, unbelievably, 56%, more than half of business managers, believe that eliminating learning and development would make no difference or would actually improve performance. Now, how can they possibly believe that? We've never understood better how people learn. We've never had better tools and technology with which to teach. What could be the problem? How could more than half of managers, more than half of our clients, believe that eliminating learning and development would make no difference? Well, the problem is that managers see the investment of time and money. They see their people going to training classes. They know what they're being charged as part of their budget for the training, but they're not really seeing a change in performance. And so they begin to ask, well, why are we spending all this money if we're not actually seeing a change in performance? Because you see, the business that we are in as learning and development professionals is this. Today we have some level of performance. Now that level of performance might already be quite good, but to stay competitive, our belief is that if we invest in training and development, we will get to a new and higher level of performance. So that's what the business is expecting. They're expecting that if they invest in training and development, people will perform at a new and higher level. That means then that our product, what the company buys from us, what the business manager expects from us, is improved performance. And that our value is how much we helped improve performance and meet business objectives. In other words, the business does not actually want training. They want the results of training. That is, they want better performance from their folks. Now, in order for training to create value, people have to learn new skills. And then, critically, the center step there, they must transfer them to the job in order to improve performance and create value for the company. Now, it's really that application that creates the value. If we don't get the application, we don't get the results. One way to think about it simply is that the results that the company enjoys as a result of training and development are the product, that is the multiplication of the amount of learning that took place times the amount of transfer. And that equals results. So that means you have to have great learning. We've got to ensure that we use the most modern approaches, use technology when it's appropriate to ensure people get great learning. But the point is that even if we get learning that's a 10 out of 10, but we don't get any transfer, people don't actually use it on the job, then the results that the company sees is actually zero. So it takes both great learning and great learning transfer to generate value for the company from training and development. So it all comes down to what we call the moment of truth. And the moment of truth is this: the employee has been to training or has learned something, has been taught a new task or a new skill, has been coached, and now they've got to accomplish a task that relates to their job. And they really have two choices. They could do it the new way they've just been taught, or they could do it the same old way they've always done it, which might be, in fact, to do nothing. Now, which of those two paths an employee takes, and we've drawn the new way uphill, we've drawn it as stairs because it's hard to change a habit. And so it's going to take effort to do it the new way. On the other hand, we've drawn the old way as a slide because it has the force of gravity behind it. It's simple to just slip back into old habits. So in order to get people to perform in a new way, to perform in a new and better way, we need them to make the extra effort to climb those stairs, to make the effort to master the new way. Now, which of those paths they take depends on how they answer two fundamental questions. The first question is, can I? Can I do it the new way? Did the training actually teach me how? Did I leave the training confident enough that I could perform in the new way? The second question is, will I? Even if I know how, will I make the effort to climb those stairs to do it in the new way? Now, what affects the answers to those two questions? Everything. But both must be answered yes. So if people say, no, I can't do it. So if the training was too theoretical, if it was e-learning that was just page turning and not real opportunity to practice, then the training has failed. But even if they say, yes, I can, they also have to say, yes, I will. They have to be willing to make the effort. Because if they can do it but are not willing to do it, it's still a failure. So both questions have to be answered yes. What influences those two questions? Basically, everything. It's not just about the training. It's about the pre-training environment, what signals were they sent before they came to training. It's about the way the instruction was constructed, the content, and the way that it's delivered. It's about the post-training environment, what happens afterwards. So it's not just about the training, and that's why you can deliver great training, and from the business's point of view, it's a failure because it didn't actually change behavior and improve performance. So how do we reinvent training? I mean, clearly the business managers are telling us they want training to be different. If half of the managers believe training isn't doing any good, we need to reinvent it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take responsibility for the whole process. By that I mean not just putting on the instruction, but making sure that it's actually applied. We get out of the training business and we focus on performance improvement. We don't think of ourselves as training professionals. We think of ourselves as performance improvement professionals. We use whatever technology, which might even include classrooms, that works the best, and we manage the work environment as well as the instruction, because the work environment can make or break any training. When I say we take responsibility for the whole process, what I mean is that we really think about an end-to-end, starting with the business linkage up front all the way to results, and the results are the results on the job. Is it, in fact, paying a dividend? Are people performing better? Now, the most instructional design models, even so ADDIE, and even more recently the successive approximation technique, Agile, and so forth, all focus only on the instruction, on the classroom. So even in ADDIE, when they say evaluate, they really mean, did you meet your learning objectives? But what we're saying is that to really add value to the business, we have to start much more focused on what does the business really need? What are the key goals for the business? And then when we evaluate, we have to evaluate, did we change performance? Because if people learned things but didn't change performance, we didn't add value. And that's what the 6 Ds are about. The 6 Ds are 6 disciplines that are practiced by the most effective learning organizations, because they really go beyond ADDIE, go beyond SAM, and really think about training from a business point of view, which is, am I improving performance? So what are they? Well, here's a quick introduction. They're a set of processes and tools. They're a way of thinking about helping people learn and develop that extend and complement traditional instructional design like ADDIE or SAM. They take a more holistic view of learning. So we're really thinking about the whole process, which is much more than just the instruction, in order to create business value. The only reason to have a training department, the only reason to have HR, is to add value to the business. So let me introduce quickly the 6 Ds. D1 is define the business outcome, and what that means is start with the end in mind. Be clear about what the business needs, because at the end of the day, we are a business function. We must support the business. We must improve the performance of the business. D2 is to design the complete experience. I don't know what happened to my thing here, but we'll find it. D2 is design the complete experience. What that means is think about the whole process from beginning to end. What happens before people come to class, because the message that their manager sends is as important as the class itself. So what happens before and after? So we expand our thinking as learning professionals into the pre and post training. D3 is to deliver for application. What that means is teach in a way that makes it easy for people to apply the skills. Okay, so not so much PowerPoint, not so much talking. Give people a chance to get hands-on, to really do experiential learning if we want them to be able to perform on the job. D4 is to drive learning transfer. And that means to make sure that that step happens, that when they get back to work, they actually apply what they learn, and to actively drive it, not just hope that it happens. D5 is to deploy performance support. And what that means is give people job aids, smartphone apps, systems, social networks, whatever it takes to ensure that people do the right thing at the right time every time. So use the technology, use our design expertise to make sure that when people return to work, they can use what they learned in a way that produces value. And then the final D is D6, which is to document results. And that is to actually measure whether we improve performance or not. Not whether people learned things, not whether they liked the class, but are we changing behavior and delivering value to the business, and then to use those insights to feedback to improve all of the 6 Ds. So to revisit quickly by way of summing up the 3 questions again, do we still need training? Yes, because learning is more important than ever. Structured learning has an important role to play, but our role is changing. With the advent of technology, social learning, other things, there are new venues available to us, and we need to embrace and use those. But there still is a place for structured learning. Does it need to be reinvented? Yes, it does. The old model is outmoded and it's simply not working. It's not delivering enough value to the business because people aren't actually changing their behaviors in ways that improve performance. How do we reinvent it? We shift our focus. We do not think about teaching. We think about improving performance, and we change the way we approach our jobs. We use whatever approaches and technologies get the job done, the job being improved performance. We let go of our obsession with content. We spend much too much class time just delivering content. It's easily accessible. We don't need to keep filling people with content. We need to take that class time to give people time to practice and experience. And lastly, we manage the whole process, which includes the transfer climate, what it's like when people go back to work, what messages the organization sends them so they make the effort to climb the stairs to do things in the new way. If that intrigues you, you want to learn more, there is a field guide to the 6 Ds that was just published about a month ago. There also are authorized 6 Ds trainers in both Singapore and Malaysia. So I think at the end, as I understand it, we'll come back for questions. But let me now turn the microphone back over, and then we'll come back to questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Roy. I have actually kept the introduction of Roy till after his presentation for a very good reason. Would you know his background? I can take you a bed for dinner. Nobody would probably guess what his background is. Dr. Roy Pollock, who has just shared with us, is the Chief Learning Officer and co-founder of the 6D company that we know. He is co-author of the bestseller, 6 Disciplines of Breakthrough Learning, and the field guide to the 6 Ds. He has extensive experience in education, line management, strategy development. He is a popular speaker and consultant with a deep passion for helping individuals and organizations excel. Now you know his obsession with performance. Prior to founding the company, he served as the Chief Learning Officer for the Fort Hill Company. He has also been the Assistant Dean for Curriculum Development, Cornell University College of Vet Medicine. This is a surprise. VP Strategic Product Development for Smith Kline Beecham Animal Health, and VP Companion and Animal Division for Pfizer. He received his BA Magna Cum Laude from Williams College, his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree with the highest honors, as well as his PhD degree from Cornell University. And he lives in the faraway New York. It's nighttime now. Roy, we thank you. Keep your questions. And now, before you get on to your session number 2, I'm going to introduce you to a very lovely presenter who has come from a very, very long way. You will never guess which country she came from. Again, that's for you to find out later. Dr. Anna Tavis. She is a senior organizational consultant and executive coach with extensive global practice with the Futureworkplace group. Dr. Tavis' corporate practice spanned the Americas, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. Where else in the world have you not gone to, Anna? She practices in a broad variety of industries, including financial services, banking and insurance, technology, manufacturing, and the pharmaceutical sectors. She has been previously with Motorola as the European Head of Organizational Development based in UK with responsibilities for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. She was also previously the Global Head for Talent Management with Nokia based in Helsinki, Finland, working extensively in Europe, India, Eurasia, and Middle East. She was also Global Chief Learning Officer for United Technologies based in Hartford, CC, and managing a team of 34 globally based learning professionals. Also Global Head of Talent and Organizational Development, AIG, Financial Services, based in New York, serving many clients in 43 countries. And of course, currently, you want to know where she is. Currently, she's on the faculty of the New York University, Executive Director of People and Strategy Journals, and also co-editor of a book point, counterpoint, new perspectives on people and strategy. Her core specialties include integrated talent management, performance management, succession planning, org change and design, learning and development, social HR. With these two speakers with such illustrious backgrounds, it takes a long time to tell you more about them. But I'm not going to waste your time talking anymore. I'm just going to hand over this session to Anna, who has a lot to shock you. Over to you, Anna.
Okay. Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm actually in your time zone. Hello. We're just getting the slides ready to go, and I will be building on what you've just heard from Ray. Very enlightening presentation about what training actually should be and how we get there. Okay, so you can see my slides now. I am going to lift you all the way up to a very disruptive trend that may solve for a lot of issues that Ray just talked about the willingness to learn and the innovation that is happening inside organizations and is affecting the HR practice with all aspects of HR, including learning, performance management, recruitment, etc., is really coming to us from socialization of business or consumerization of the work environment that we live in. And I think in some ways, this is going to solve for a lot of the issues of engagement that we've experienced in organizations recently. So today, let me just give you the highlights of what I'm going to quickly walk you through, and I will have the opportunity to talk to you live after this presentation. I'm going to just tell you that social HR comes from social business. As everything in HR, we need to stay very connected to what's happening in the business world. I will explain to you what the hype cycle is. On the one hand, we have to be very excited about what's going on. On the other, we also have to be very careful about not to get too excited and be realistic and apply to Ray's point of what we learn to reality. And there is a level of inflation sort of in the expectations about what's happening in the social world. But I will give you some tools to think about those innovations in kind of in a measured way. I will mention the bigger context of what we see as the shift behind the scenes sort of the revolution in the workplace through the social technologies that are coming in, and that is the change in the economic incentive, which is as some of our social entrepreneurs and social scientists are saying, changing significantly. I'll talk to you about purpose economy and reputational economy. And then we'll get down very quickly to what's actually, how it reflects in the practices of HR. And we see in the best practice companies, in the companies that are very innovative, embracing these new trends, how talent acquisition is changing, learning and development is changing, performance management, all the way to org design and change. So I'll give you some highlights of what's happening in those fields of HR. And at the very end, let's together reflect on where do we stand and are we going to get on the bus, off the bus, do we lead, follow, or get out of the way of this social revolution that's happening in the workplace. So let me just quickly take you through some of these concepts, and then let's have a robust discussion about where you are and where we should see the whole trend going. And one of the things that I want to say here is that that we would the highlights of the title for the whole presentation, Social HR, could also have a few subtitles that would be the personalization of the workplace, and sometimes you hear social, personalized, and consumerized, and consumerization of HR. And it all has to do with the fact that those trends that are affecting the workplace are really coming to us from the outside. So the social business, as we know it, is the business that's created on the cloud-based, collaborative technology platform and is driven by innovation in technology that is happening outside of technology, of the outside of the organizations, oftentimes in the consumer environment. And where were we before? And some of it we've heard from Ray's presentation. We really created our organizations based on the industrial model. And I have a kind of a picture here that describes that most of our current organizations and practices, including learning, development, recruitment, et cetera, were designed for a very different economy. And they were effectively addressing it. Most industrial organizations have been targeting efficiency, economies of scale, but not really enabling collaboration, creativity, autonomy that the current economic condition of where we are as advanced societies, as advanced economies requires to be. It has definitely not been individual employee focused. So what's coming in is what has become known as the purpose and reputational economy, where purpose and reputation will dominate the way we do business and will dominate the HR focus and the HR practices. Purpose economy, some of the social economists are telling us now, is the new space where purpose will supplant information as the core driver of our economy. And if you think about it, agrarian economy took us thousands of years to get through. It was followed by industrial economy that took us a couple of hundreds of years to get through. We got into the information age sometime in the 90s, 80s and 90s, and guess what? We're seeing an acceleration of those economic cycles, and what we're seeing with the millennials coming into the workplace, it's about the purpose. So the economy is changing, and it is also about reputational economy with the exposure that we're getting through social media, social space, is what defines who we are as individuals, as employees, etc. It often comes down to our reputation. So those two terms, please watch out for them. It's about the purpose and it's about reputation. So what does it require from us in the workplace? It is about personalization at work. It's about consumerization of experience, both inside and outside the organization. What we are seeing now, and it's probably a reversal of what we've experienced before, is people coming into the workplace are a lot more adept with technology, with exposure, with collaboration, et cetera, et cetera. They're bringing their tools, they're bringing their expectations of the workplace. And what they're finding on the other side of the firewall a lot of times in our organizations is that they're not allowed to be using their devices. They're not allowed to be going out on the social media and connecting with their friends. And that experience that people have at work has a very negative effect on engagement and definitely creates a certain talent challenge for the organization that really want to engage the best and the brightest. So the companies are very aware of this challenge, and they are directly addressing personalization at work in a measured way, I would say, because definitely for some, it's a much easier transition to make, and these are usually new companies, technology companies, that are creating their cultures from scratch. They go back no more than 10, 15 years, and a lot of them have to do with technological innovation. At the same time, the more traditional blue chip companies are slowly coming to the realization that they need to accelerate the adoption of those tools and the adoption of new processes in HR, and that process has started to occur. And so I want to introduce you to this concept of the HR hype cycle, social HR hype cycle, which is my take on an accepted measurement of maturity cycle that Gartner Group, an IT and social media consultancy based in the United States, uses to measure all technologies. They actually came up with this very interesting way of identifying where different innovations are in terms of their adoption. And as you can see, they go through on the maturity and visibility level matrix. They go through the trigger state, then they go through the peak of inflated expectations, then they go through the trough of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment, and then plateau of productivity. So there is this kind of maturity curve that most innovation, both in technology and I argue in HR, have to go through. And as you can see, the other line that goes here shows that the value actually increases as the adoption of those technologies matures. And I showed you how I see where different practices, HR practices, are in that hype cycle. The most advanced in the adoption of social technologies at work is probably the recruitment talent acquisition function, as you can see on this cycle. And it definitely has to do with the external market focus nature of recruitment. As you know, most of recruitment has now moved to social media and LinkedIn and Facebook and other social platforms that exist in different countries. But globally, we see that this is probably the most mature practice in HR. Then we see learning and development, to Ray's point. Learning and development is quickly realizing that they need to adopt those technologies, and not only need, but really expand their vocabulary and reach through adopting those social tools and introducing peer-to-peer learning, not just either top-down apprenticeship model or the traditional classroom learning. We see performance management now is reaching that point of maturity where some of the organizations are adopting very interesting online technologies to measure performance and to create a development-focused performance management process. I'll speak a little bit more about each one of them. I think that the big data right now is at this peak of inflated expectations. You know, there's a lot of talk about big data and what it's going to do with HR and how it's going to transform it. But we're really in a very early stages of understanding what will be involved. And my prediction is that it's going to go through the trough of disillusionment before we actually embrace what big data can do for us. And then very early stages of thinking about where we're going to go with social media when it comes to executive levels and succession planning, because that part of the HR practice remains to be very high touch, etc. So I like to think about the maturity model or hype cycle when I think about social tools that we're very quickly adopting for inside organizations. Right, really quickly, social recruitment 2.0. You know, there was a time when it was about LinkedIn, and some of us or most of us are on LinkedIn, and we're very proud of it, but guess what? This is already old news. We're seeing further customization of the recruitment process, segmentation of the market with very specific social platforms that recruit for specific talent and actually differentiate themselves from generic platforms like LinkedIn. Where LinkedIn is going in its own right, it's becoming more of a content provider. It's becoming more of a big data-driven a type of platform, far beyond of the initial premise that it's going to be a recruitment tool for professional community. And I just mentioned a few names here, and these slides are going to be available to you. So I do encourage you to go out there and see what those specific recruitment platforms are doing. But they're very cool. They are targeting very specific markets, and they are known in those specific markets. Social recruitment 2.0, again, how much more advanced it is than what we used to see. Now we're getting into the space where reputation is everything, and reputation is no longer controlled by the employer. It used to be the PR departments, the marketing departments in big companies that control the brand. And that is no longer the case. In the United States, Glassdoor, for example, is very known, and I know there are other social platforms where it's actually in the reverse. It's the employees who go out there and rate the company and rate the CEO and rate their managers. In that space, the democratization of the internal space of the company, where everyone can go in and voice their opinion, obviously taking a certain risk, as we know there are consequences to that. But nonetheless, all that internal company information that was so well controlled before is the genie is out of the bottle. It's out there, and it's and the employees have as much power in this consumer environment, this peer-to-peer relationship, to control and influence where the brand of the company is going. And then the other one on this, very advanced, again, much more advanced than any other area of social HR, is the cloud score. Some of you may be familiar with that site, Cloud, that now the cloud score is the measurement of the overall online influence. It's sort of a generic site that collects everything about you on social media and in cyberspace, and then creates a certain measure, a rating from 1 to 100 of what your cloud score is about your visibility, about your social influence, about your connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. And we've known some cases and seen some cases in some industries. Obviously, marketing and recruitment are mostly plugged into this this particular area. And in marketing companies, we've known of some cases where people didn't get jobs because their cloud score was too low. And that's something that obviously they can control, manipulate, etc. But what we're seeing is the recruitment goes far beyond the resume that we ourselves create for ourselves. That our reputation, who we are, our network is all available now for the potential recruiters to see, as well as ourselves looking at, what do we know about the employer? Do we really want to join the company? How are they doing in terms of mentoring, learning development, and career opportunities for me? So very quickly, the next very evolved area is social learning. Again, we are in the next generation of social learning where we move beyond e-learning. It's no longer talking heads, online universities where professors still dominates. It's really about mobile learning. It's about snackable segments of, and that's the term I picked up from the media company. They talk about snackable experience, which means small bites, transferable through online from mobile devices, and it is ubiquitous, and you can get it just in time at the time of need. And that's to Ray's point. I think that's when you are going to be willing and absolutely to apply, because the learning is very relevant to the situation you find yourself in. The second thing is, obviously, I have another one on learning here. It's about collaboration. Peer-to-peer comes as much into play as anything what we've previously known. In fact, it's in my experience, it will start to dominate, because what we know is people are solving problems by going to other people and asking, in kind of open source environment, what the solutions are. And that's the best learning, because it can be immediately applied and it's relevant. And it creates engagement. It's challenging enough, and it's absolutely personalized, because it's my issue and I have the whole world helping me solve it. And finally, gamified. Gamification is coming in big time, and it's about really understanding all the way to the neuroscience of why we're so hooked on games, and what do games do to in terms of helping us learn and keeping our engagement and keeping our focus, etc. And we go far beyond just learning, and gamification is beginning to get used in performance management and in a very experimental early stages. But it's the use of game mechanics, the principle of rewards, recognitions for non-game applications in order to increase engagement and loyalty. Again, this is another solution to Ray's point about why people don't engage, don't absorb and apply learning. More on the learning side, you probably have all heard about MOOCs, massive online open courses. There are a few companies that are doing it, but what we know, Coursera, Udacity, ADX, these are the companies probably best known for creating those MOOCs, but we know that now companies are beginning to create their own, challenging those L&D departments that Ray has spoken about. And there's still the jury's out there on the effectiveness of MOOCs. You know, when you have 2 million people taking a course, you know, what is the attrition rate is quite significant, and there's still a question of certification of those, etc. But nonetheless, these technologies are beginning to enter the market, compete with the traditional ways of learning and development. And I think I personally, being an optimist and early adopter of all of these technologies, I personally find it very, very encouraging and liberating. Now, performance management. Performance management, as I said, is still very early stages. Unlike recruitment, unlike learning and development, we're experimenting with this core HR process. What's being changed now is more and more companies are getting away from performance, again, early stages, creating performance ratings and using performance management as a assessment tool that then produces the data for compensation decisions. Those are beginning to get separate, and performance management is looked at right now through the tools that are beginning to be available to us to be more of a development tool, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to stretch on the job. There's more attention being paid to setting the goals. Those goals have to be stretch goals. They have to be relevant to the a job. They have to be concrete and specific, and they have to deliver. At the same time, I think what's really important, it's really important, is that we give feedback. The whole performance management process is around the feedback, badging, etc. And I'm just giving here an example of one company that very successfully adopted Work.com. It's a company of Salesforce that that adopted this new way of measuring performance. There are many, many more. So I skipped a few others. I was going to talk about bossless organizations and how social and media are changing the way we structure organizations. There's less and less hierarchy. There's more and more peer-to-peer environment. As you might have heard in your part of the world, one of our retail companies, online retails, Zappos, has totally abandoned management levels and experimenting with a complete sort of collaborative space. So there's a lot of experimentation that goes on around organizational design. And so the question we have here is, what do we do as HR? You know, I'm showing here a chart, you know, with a big question in red. Do we lead? Do we lead this revolution? Do we follow? How do we keep up? Or do we just get out of the way and make it happen? And that's the question I want to ask of all of you, because you participate as consumers. You all, you know, have your devices. You all know what the consumer environment can do for us. So when you come back to your organizations, how do we lead the way of change and bring these opportunities, these new innovative practices to the way our organizations are run and actually help the business change and help the business transfer. And that will be the position I would recommend. And there are certain ways of guiding the organization through this change process that we are now examining and experimenting with. And I will be more than happy to chat with you after this presentation about what actually is being done from the point of view of transforming our companies into this new space. And okay, I think I'm almost out of time. Just wanted to let you know that you know, we can always meet on LinkedIn. That's one of the options, probably most reliable. And I hope that this is just a teaser for a lot of good thinking on all of our behalf about what we can do in the organization. But one thing I can promise, there's no defined formula that I can recommend. All of it is open to all of you. There's a lot of space for innovation, a lot of space for creative thinking, and I want to encourage you to jump in and lead the way. Thank you so much, and we'll talk later.
We want to thank both our wonderful presenters for sharing. They have so much more to share, but we don't have the time for them to share. And viewers, it's now your turn. The more you ask questions, the more we will all learn together. So over to you, viewers and participants. Do we have Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore coming on? Just put your hand up so that we know you would like to ask a question. I also see Robert Yeo, CEO and ED of STADA here. I see STADA Student Chapter, the Global Connect Club, somewhere ready to ask questions too. I also see the president of STADA here today, Mr. Keith Lim. You're here. So now we're waiting for the first question. Ling Ling? From Samsung,
Hello.
thank you.
Hello, hi. I don't know if you can hear me or not because I've not tried it before. Can you hear me? Hello.
A little soft. Can you maybe go nearer the mic?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Now we can.
All right, I have to be very close to my laptop. So thank you very much, Dr. Anna and Dr. Roy, for your presentation. It was quite insightful. I'm with Learning and Development in Samsung Asia, and I've got a question for Dr. Anna. So I've also observed and noticed the trends on social HR, where we have the Y and X generation that's moving towards social technology and all sorts. But how, as we as HR professionals, are able to influence change within an organization that's highly hierarchical, where the top management mindset is still stuck in the industrial age, whereas the people that we're hiring are more of the Y and millennial generation coming forth. So are there any kind of advice that you can give to help, I don't know, support this kind of change? Thank you.
Yes, I think it's a very, very good question. And in fact, most of the learning and development is kind of getting to be in the reverse, where before we needed to be educating the younger people, the apprenticeship model, you know, it's kind of the hierarchy educates and initiates the newcomers into the organization. Now, because again, this powerful consumer influence that these young people are bringing into the organization, it's in the reverse, because in fact, the senior management have been behind the firewall for so long that they haven't experienced it other than through their children. So I think that to have a real focus on the senior leadership development from that perspective, and some companies started to bring in reverse mentoring, and there are some really good examples of reverse mentoring that we could recommend, and it could be a formal process of designing. The other powerful tool that I found is bringing the science to help them understand why these technologies are really good for the brain. And I know that you had some seminars on neuroscience, etc. That there is a kind of a logical scientific way of explaining what's going on to them. And most importantly, and it's the third factor that I would recommend to consider, there's a significant status to a lot of the senior people and the young people coming in and actually knowing for the first time in such an obvious way a lot more than most senior people do. So we have to be careful and culturally very specific, how it could be addressed, that status threat. That it is actually, I would recommend to find a creative way of making it prestigious and making it desirable for the senior ranks to join the revolution, as you might call it. And to do that, you have to have a very visible senior executive embrace that change, especially if it is a CEO who suddenly starts to blog and encourages others. So that senior management role modeling, find somebody who's going to be your advocate, who's going to be the supporter and sponsor, and work with them on changing the mindset and setting the example and showing that this is the only way to go. You're either going to be on the bus or we're done as a business. It's a business requirement, that's it. So we can talk more about that offline as well. I'll be very happy to share some of the best practices that we've seen.
That would be
It's
great.
interesting
Thank
that
you very much, Anna.
General Electric actually teaches the senior executives how to use social media to communicate. At the time I was an executive, it took half a day to make a 3-minute video. Now they actually run a course to teach them how to use this, because this is the media by which people communicate, and the senior managers need to know how to do it if they're going to be effective.
Thank you, Roy, for your contribution, and thank you, Ling Ling, for the question. Very quickly, the second question. I see Robert.
Yeah, I think I have a comment for both speakers. We are on a very interesting journey today, right? And we tend to, sometimes senior management tend to think that training is the end all. If they have a problem, let's do training. And therefore, the expectation of performance after training. And then we interchange training with learning, right? Training is basically, if you want to define clear, is equipping, because training is more a longer journey. And then, of course, there's the end part of it, which is training is transfer of knowledge, and then you have the application of knowledge. And sometimes we forget that when you come to application of knowledge, the environment of the company, even the people may not have the tools to really translate the learning knowledge they receive into application. So there are gaps, right? Maybe the speakers would like to comment on how we close these gaps.
And who would like to respond first, Roy or Anna? Roy?
Sure. Let me just, Robert, first, I agree with you. One of the reasons that training is not as effective as it should be is that many managers try to use it to solve problems it was never designed to solve. Even learning is not going to solve all problems. Sometimes the problem is the system is wrong. Sometimes people don't have clear objectives. Sometimes they didn't get good feedback. Training people when the environment isn't right will not help them. So the first problem is, again, as learning professionals, those of us who are learning professionals, we need to say no when training is not the right answer and help management understand when it will and won't work. And then to your second point, that if management doesn't understand that they must be part of the solution, if they're not supporting the training afterwards, if they don't have the work environment that encourages people to learn and grow on the job, then the training will fail, any effort will fail. So we need to help management understand training is not a solution for everything, and they must be part of the solution, or they'll be wasting their time and everybody's money. Anything to add, Anna?
Yeah, I think I actually also observed an opposite problem, where they see training but they don't see learning. That class, to your point, and this is why we don't get the results that we want. I think with the tools that I've been just discussing and presenting here, it's going to be so much employee driven and the need-driven, that with a few exceptions, that will be the predominant learning space, where it will be just in time, on demand, in the moment. Some of the problems with training that we've seen before in a traditional organizations is, yes, we need learning, but you're going to only make this class in 6 months because that's when it's offered. And it's very different from the situation where I need to know how to do it. I go to YouTube, I find the solution on my own. I don't need to wait for the class. Even if it's the most complex, how do I use a spreadsheet? It's available to us. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem going forward when we enable people and empower people to learn on their own when they have to solve their own problems. And the managers will have to be the coaches to encourage people to do it on their own rather than a paternalistic model where the training sits somewhere in the learning and development department, and that's where we go to learn.
I just want to touch on a point. I think we should start shifting our mindset away from training per se, because when we talk about training, after a while, the employees expect that it's the responsibility of the company to train me. Because if you don't train me, I can't do my job better, therefore it's your responsibility. I think we need to start moving into the learning arena where learning becomes you yourself responsible for your own growth, and therefore it's no more the company's pursuit of training you, but you equipping yourself because you want to grow, and the desire must come from you rather from the employees itself. Any comment?
30 years ago, Peter Drucker said, all development is self-development, that it is arrogance for a company to assume it can develop you. Companies have the responsibility to make the opportunities available, but to your point, Robert, ultimately people have to accept the responsibility for their own learning and their own development. And in the brave new world, when all the information is available, when the kind of technologies that Dr. Tavis is talking about are readily available, then it'll be even more a matter of the individual's responsibility. We have to structure our organizations to both empower them but hold them accountable for their own development.
And I want to just very quickly jump back and say what the organization is responsible for and the manager is responsible for is feedback. Feedback is huge because I can be learning on my own, but what sort of traction do I get in my, on my job, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of kind of piping content into the people, let me tell them how they're doing, and so that they can self-correct and really learn from making mistakes. And I think that again, the reversal sort of from being the initiator of learning to being the coach, the mentor, and create the environment of also rewarding and recognizing people is what the organization is responsible for.
For those who are waiting to ask questions, just put your hand up. We know you want to ask a question. Right now we have a question from Ayala from the Philippines. The question is, in an organization where the culture is quite conservative, how does one promote a culture of learning? Who might like to take that question, Roy? Anna?
You want me to answer?
Please.
The one thing I want to point out, which I'm really happy to hear, that we recognize here all that learning is very closely connected to the culture. Learning takes on different cultural shapes and forms, and it really is very important to make it culturally consistent, because it doesn't matter what kind of tools and models we bring in, if it goes contrary with how the culture operates, it might not be effective. It may be rejected by the culture. So to your point, if we're going into a conservative environment, again, what is absolutely critical in that type of situation is find a powerful sponsor. I think in the hierarchies top down, if you have the support and encouragement and role modeling from at least one senior member of the team, of the top team, then you're going to be successful. It may not come right away, but it will happen. However, again, in the hierarchies, it's different from the organizations that tend to be much more, employee-based and more democratic in a sense. That it may not happen grassroots. And what you will do, you will make a very strong business case to the hierarchs, to the people at the top of the organization, that the best and the brightest people are not going to join because they're not going to be able to learn. And as we know from all the surveys, from engagement, from different consulting firms giving us data on what motivates people at this point in history is really about their professional growth, opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And those people who are driven, those people who want to learn, grow, which are the majority, are not going to join the companies. What does that mean? That means that they're not going to be, competitive and successful in the traditional way, because people are not going to tolerate the 9 to 5, keep your head down type of environment. So I think making a strong business case, again, coming at it rationally, and getting sponsorship on your side is going to be critical for the success of that particular initiative.
Before I maybe invite Melinda, Director from Tech, if she has a question, but maybe Roy, you want to add something to what Anna has said?
No, let's we'll take another question.
Okay, Elinda.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Well, thank you.
Yeah, my question is regarding learning. In traditional ways, we learn in school and then we go on to do some technical courses or to do a master's. But now learning is on the social platform actually takes quite a lot of time out of our work. Because you can be going on to your Facebook or to some internet, and you can be reading a whole lot of information, and it takes quite a bit of time. So how does the employer manage that and so-called guide the employees in their learning process?
Roy,
yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'll also let Dr. Tavis answer. Let's be clear, people learn all the time.
Yes.
I mean, people have always been learning all the time. Indeed, many of the bad habits that employees have, they learned. We taught them. We've actually taught them a lot of bad habits about training. For example, one of the reasons people don't do pre-work before a training class is we taught them it doesn't matter. So people have always been learning all the time. The kind of learning that one can do to solve problems using the internet, using YouTube, using social networks can be extremely valuable. The question is, are they really working, or are they doing personal stuff? I'm old-fashioned enough that I actually expect employees to work when they're working for me. I think that's as one of the gray-haired set. That's one of my challenges, is to help me understand when people are actually learning and looking up things and moving ahead, and when they're socializing, which to me is fine, but doesn't pay the bills for the business. Is that just because I'm an old curmudgeon, Anna?
Yeah, I think a part of it has to do with how we ran the business before. Because a lot of what we're going to see is going to be really counterintuitive to the old model. And there's nothing more compelling than having a very successful company like Google, for example, allowing each employee to have 20% off. 20% of their work time is whatever they want to do. And actually, what we see is a lot of innovation is coming out of that 20% allocated to the Google free time. And they have a very powerful analytics group that captures that time, and they create a business case. And so what is counterintuitive to us, back to my point about how do we drive change management, is to really create the business case. And we have more and more data and more success stories and business cases out there that show that that counterintuitive model actually works. And it has to do, yeah. So I know that.
Well,
there's
but
some,
isn't even saying 20% off? That's really kind of the old model too, isn't it? Shouldn't I really just say, you need to get the job done? Here's the job that needs to be done. How you do it and how you allocate your time is your problem. Because even if I start sending 20, 80%, that's kind of old think, isn't it?
no.
Because then I'm counting hours rather than productivity.
What you're describing also, there are models out there for smaller companies, you know, but we're talking about the business that also has to be run. There's an operational side to the business, and it has to be addressed. It has to be, to your point, you have to get things done, and not everything is innovation. And there are functions, let's face it, in the organization, and there are businesses that will remain to be run on a different model. It's just a diversification of those models. And I will give you an example. On the one hand, I talked to you about Google. On the other, I'm looking at the nuclear plant, and I don't want the nuclear plant people to kind of do their things on their own. You know, that's probably, I'm not going to take those chances. So I think that we have to be, back to the Samsung question that we had here, we have to be very culturally specific and business specific and think from within the business. There's no one model that is going to solve all of our problems. We have to be, this is why the role of HR is so critical. We have to be creative. We have to think from within our culture, what's appropriate to us, what's the operational side to it, what's the creative side to our business. And then we actually go out there and we recruit specific type of people. Because there are people who are going to choose to be in banking. There are people who choose to go and work for Google. And there are people who are going to choose to work for other types of organizations. So this is where we get into the diversity, inclusion, and lots of other things that contribute to the actual success of the business and the innovation. And it's a very complex, we're getting into a much more complex environment. But I would say it's a lot more interesting to work in that environment because we are now creative thinkers from within HR, from within learning, from within performance management and training management, rather than just, you know, the operators that get classes running and put butts on seats, as we used to say, right? And that's what all we measure. So this environment is coming, and we got to be ready.
Thank you very much. This exchange, I think, I wish I could have reinvented time and given both our wonderful presenters and all our participants more time. But at this moment in time, it is not reinvented, so time has stood still, and we've surpassed our time. We want to honor those who have blocked in the time for this session. I'm not sure if Roy has one short sentence or any last words. If anybody else, Robert or anybody else, has any last word. If not, we're going to invite you to get into the Facebook and talk to us some more, because I'm sure both our presenters would like to continue the conversation with you. If there is no urgent hands up for any last minute presentation or response, viewers, with much regret, we need to bring this very provocative session to an end. We promise you provocation, we promise you practicalities, we promise you some prophetic words. I think you have had all of that, and I think, like me, you wish you had more time. Viewers, thank you so much for participating. Presenters, thank you very much for sharing generously and being so gracious about your sharing. Just a few, one last word for the road. We were, as challenged by Roy, become performance improvement professionals. To borrow his two questions, employer, employee, organization, your choice. Can I, will I prepare myself and my organization for the brave new world, or would I plunge into it unprepared? And Anna has challenged you. You either lead, follow, or get out of the way of the social revolution that's happening in the workplace. And self-development is our choice, our responsibility. And with that, we will say, please continue to interact with STADA. Go into STADA's YouTube. Search for STADA. You will surely find the video. LinkedIn users, you can view this group in the topic called Community Spirit. And with that, this is Sally Chew, your moderator, signing off from the Global Connect Village, the connecting place at Temasek Polytechnic. Have a great week and a great day ahead. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.